What's up folks, Maximilian here, and welcome back to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, The Online Warrior Season 2. Now, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened over the past week that I wanted to talk about. Some really interesting stuff that's happened to the game as of late, and when it comes to a game that's been out for some time like Ultimate Marvel 3 has, we're coming up fairly soon on the 1-year anniversary of the game. I wanted to talk about some of this stuff, and one of the most recent and interesting glitches is the Nova glitch that happened over the past week. So, to give you guys a little bit of history, the Nova glitch is a screen-altering glitch. This is very similar to something that happened a bit earlier in the lifespan of Ultimate Marvel 3. For you guys that might have remembered, within the first couple of months, Desk and many others found this piece of technology with Morrigan and Strider, where Morrigan would go into astral vision and Strider would go into a wall cling. And for some reason, when Strider did the wall cling, the game would just flip itself. That's a kind of a general explanation. Maybe it's not exactly what happened, but that was a part of the process. And all of a sudden, you were like on the opposite end of the stage, and everything was like backwards world, and you can really mess around with the camera and do all this crazy stuff and get into areas and get into angles that you normally would never see. This is where you get a lot of that footage of characters like walking towards the screen, and really cool stuff like that. And I actually really like these glitches to an extent. The big issue is that some of them are very easily accessible. The big problem with the Morrigan glitch was the fact that it was so easy to do. All you needed was a combination of like Morrigan and Strider, I'm pretty sure, and plop, you can just flip the screen and your opponent literally could not do anything for the remainder of the game. This isn't actually something new to the Versus series, especially the Versus Capcom games. There has been several other glitches in previous games, most notably the Gambit glitch in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Literally, if Gambit charged up one move and then did another after a snapback, I'm pretty sure that's how it went, Gambit would flip up into the screen and then literally fly away. Now, the big problem with this glitch in Marvel 2 was the fact that it locked up the game, I'm pretty sure. They patched it for Marvel 2 when it eventually came out on systems because it was technically a quote-unquote game-breaking glitch. If you did it to somebody in the arcade, from what I can remember, I think you had to reboot the entire machine. It was that bad. And Gambit, you could not hit him, the time wouldn't run out, from what I understand. Nonetheless, if you didn't have to reboot the machine, you couldn't win. A Gambit character or a Gambit player would hit you once, do the move, he'd fly up and out of there, and that'd be it. And I'd see it cause quite a bit of commotion many times at local tournaments and local arcades that I went to back when Marvel 2 was very prominent about over 10 years ago. That pissed some people off, that's for sure. So let's get into what happened with Marvel 3. The Nova glitch is something that's fairly similar. It allows Nova to escape the screen temporarily and not be seen or hit by the opponent. Now this is an interesting glitch because it's not exactly that hard to do. I haven't personally investigated it myself because I don't have much of a reason to do or use it unless I need to get some footage of some crazy camera angle. But that's essentially what it comes down to, how easy it is to do. Now here's the thing when it comes to glitches in games. A game like Marvel is notorious for having a lot of bugs and a lot of glitches and a lot of very weird quirks. Even though Marvel 3 is not going to get any attention anytime soon, or Ultimate Marvel 3 isn't, I don't think that there's going to be any plans to patch something like this out. The big reason is that when it comes to the day and age we live in right now where games get patched constantly, I don't think Ultimate Marvel 3 sold very well in the long run, and the game itself needs a critical sales point for a company to like justify it. So I don't think Capcom is interested in doing anything else with the Marvel license or Ultimate Marvel 3 as a game in itself, which essentially leaves us where we're at right now. The Nova glitch is going to stay, it's probably going to be banned in tournaments. The biggest thing I'm worried about is how much are we going to see this stuff happen online. Now for the most part, when you get into the higher ranks of Ultimate Marvel 3 online, you run into generally respectable competition. I say generally because there is a lot of people that try to make the online experience as difficult as they possibly can. But for the most part, a lot of people don't engage in a lot of these weird glitches. Even the stuff that happened with the original glitches with like Zero and a lot of the crazy stuff in the original Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Zero, I remember, could snap you out if you snap back the assist and your normal character. Both the characters would fly off the screen, and all of a sudden, Zero would be left alone with a giant screen all to himself, and the time would run out. It was horrible. Like that's the biggest problem, and the worst type of glitches are the ones where you don't even get to play, and the glitch literally prevents you from even playing the game. So we'll have to see where it goes from here, but by the footage, you guys can probably tell there's some really good footage over at Endless Combos YouTube channel, where he had some opportunity to go through a lot of the different screen changing and display changes that happen when this glitch happens. There's a lot of cool exploration stuff that can happen with weird graphics altering glitches like this one, and this is the kind of stuff that I really like because it's like first-person Ultimate Marvel 3. I think it's actually really cool. There was another piece of news that recently came out for the game that I thought was worthy of discussion, and was the fact that on Ultimate Marvel 3's disc, there was actually subsidiary files left on the game disc about characters that could have potentially been in the game, but ultimately weren't in the final build. Now, whether these characters actually had like moving assets, were actually properly animated, you can maybe use the character to a certain extent, was kind of unknown, because you could not get access to them via what was on the disc, and they pretty much left a couple of source files on the Ultimate Marvel 3 disc, and when people got into it and started hacking through it, they eventually came across characters like Dr. Octopus that was supposed to be in the game. Besides like Spider-Man villains, I think we've only ever seen Venom, and there really has never been any other Spider-Man villains for the most part, as far as like direct villains, and that would have been a little interesting. Dr. Octopus would have definitely been a crazy character to include into the lineup. However, he was at one point a part of the game's development, but now he is not. There was a question recently asked to Capcom executives about making that character like available or releasable in the near future. And you would think that, depending on their response, this is a pretty good idea of to gauge Capcom's ability to make future updates for Ultimate Marvel 3, because they still get asked this all the time, even though they repeatedly saying the team has moved on. A lot of folks still really want to know, are we going to see more characters in this game? Will it happen over time? Is there going to be an excellent extreme version of the game that'll come out down the line? And he pretty much said that even though the character exists to a very minor extent, that character will never ever see the light of day, because they have to go through several publishing and licensing and copyright deals with Marvel to make the character actually available, which essentially is the biggest problem with the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise, is the fact that the game has to go through the ability to get all the Capcom side of the characters produced, and then get all the Marvel side of the characters produced, but the Marvel side is a lot more tightly knit nowadays, because Marvel's a huge film company as well as a comic book company. So that's most likely never going to happen, as well as future updates for the game. The fact that he said absolutely not to something like this is pretty concrete that Ultimate Marvel 3 is not going to be seeing any DLC characters now, or anytime soon for the most part. And to further even solidify this news and information, there was another post that came from the same executive at Capcom, Sven, talking about and taking questions from users about the possibility of the future of the Marvel vs. Capcom game, since the team has moved on to other titles that worked on Ultimate Marvel 3. Does this mean the fact that Ultimate Marvel 4 is a lot closer than what we think it is? And he pretty much responded with that they haven't had any conversation or any prospects of any kind, and that for the moment, with Capcom, there is no near-term plans at all to release anything Marvel-related with Capcom. And that pretty much concludes it. It's the fact that the game itself did not perform as well as they'd wanted, and I don't even think that if the sales had warranted it, unless it sold like 1 billion copies or some like 4 million units or something crazy like that, that the prospect of doing future projects with somebody like Marvel would just be too difficult. So for anybody that's been really concerned about knowing about future characters or releases or DLC for this game, if you happen to care about any of that stuff at all, literally, and I get this question a lot, Ultimate Marvel 3 is going to be the next Marvel vs. Capcom style of game that we're going to be playing for a very long time. Most likely, I don't think we'll be seeing a sequel for this game in about another 5, maybe 6 years, at least until the next generation of consoles is available, or the game is ready for a reboot. So moving along from that topic, now that we got that out on the table, I actually wanted to bring up a community-highlighted topic that I wanted to talk about for this episode. And it's definitely been on my mind quite a bit ever since I've been playing a little bit of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 more, and the original MVC1, and Ultimate Marvel 3. I really wanted to propose this, to a lot of people. Which game do you think is the most broken? Now, let's say this right off the bat, Marvel vs. Capcom games are notoriously busted. I actually believe that they purposely, after Marvel 2, that they purposely designed Marvel 3 to be broke, to be just ridiculously crazy with the amount of stuff, because, to be honest, I look at a lot of other multiplayer and games that get played by a lot of people at any given time, and a lot of the most popular stuff are the games that are broken, are the games that give the player a lot of options, even though those options can lead to kind of like game-breaking and ridiculously powerful things. People seem to like overpowered stuff. I don't know if you guys have realized that, but when it comes to like fighting games and competitive games in general, a lot of the games that do really well are the games that have crazy powerful weapons or characters or setups or anything like that. Like, I've been doing this multiplayer, like, competitive gaming thing for quite some time, and especially when it came to like racers, to shooters, to fighters, the games that really stood the test of time and lasted a really long time are the ones that had like a lot of really broke stuff. And the really balanced games, like the severely like even play through and through, are the games that kind of like were good, but not a lot of people got really excited about them. I think the biggest reason that Ultimate Marvel 3 is one of the most popular fighting games for an audience's perspective and for people to play is that there's so much to discover in these titles when you get down to it. Literally, when I go into training mode in Ultimate Marvel 3 when I get a chance, even though there has not been that much of that for me over the past year, I like find new stuff like all the time, or stuff that I've been wanting to learn all the time, and it feels like this is an entirely different game in itself, and that's one of the most important aspects of a game that has a lot of open-ended activity for the users, especially people to figure out stuff, because when you get to show that off, everyone goes crazy when they don't see something that has been used before, even though it's ridiculously powerful, impossible to block. Nonetheless, it doesn't matter. It's really about hype, and that stuff generates a lot of hype for a game like this. So going back to our original question, which game was the most broken? Let's look back at Marvel 1. Some of the most broke stuff about Marvel 1 was, let's think about it. Red Venom is extremely powerful in that game. There are some characters that have some ridiculous unblockables in Marvel vs. Capcom 1, but for the most part, what I like to gauge a lot of these games by, for like the span of all of them, is kind of like which game doesn't let me play. Like, that's the biggest problem, is like which game has the infinites that completely stop you from playing the game, and once you get touched, it's game over. In Marvel 1, you can kind of play the game to an extent, and you can avoid the infinites, but if you eventually get touched by one, you will die if the person is good enough, but they can be kind of hard, for the most part, to maintain for a longer period of time. But in general, Marvel 1, you kind of die in 2 or 3 combos within a lot of the cast, so you can eat a couple of combos even though it is a high damage game. Moving on to Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Marvel 2, depending on the characters you have, Marvel 2, you kind of die in about 2 to 3 combos as well per character. However, the matches do last a lot longer because you have a total of 3 characters. And I think the biggest thing in Marvel 2 is the fact that mix-ups and characters that are mix-up heavy, like Magneto, using with like Sentinel and Commando and Cable and Psylocke, and characters of that nature, you guys have all seen it before, have the ability to mix you up really hard or to space you to an extent that you can't do much, depending on the character that you're using, unless you can counteract it. Marvel 2 was notoriously the cheapest fighting game ever made, the most broken fighting game ever made, and there's a lot of ridiculously broke stuff about it, and it ends up being one of the most notoriously popular fighting games ever, kind of because of it, and I think that's really interesting. But even if you can come across a guy that is ridiculously good with a lot of characters, and this even happened to me over the past, week when I was playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2, you run into guys that are pretty good at the game, but then you run into a guy using like Storm, Psylocke, and Magneto, and the mix-up ridiculousness you hardly get to play. If I knew the game a little bit better and I knew how to block these mix-ups and I knew where they were coming from, I could properly block them, and you could probably do something about it, which is why you see matches last a long time or end really quickly, which is kind of the way that Marvel goes. It's either over really fast or it takes a little while to pan out over the long run in higher competitive matches. But I'd say Marvel vs. Capcom 2 kind of like lets you play the game to an extent. When I start to think about this stuff in retrospective, and then I think of Marvel 3, it's crazy to think of like the combo potential in a game like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Combos are so much longer in this game that it's insane. Sure, there's some characters in the original games like Iron Man and a few others that have ridiculously long combos that can just go on forever, if not be infinites. But in Marvel 3, a lot of characters will just die in one combo. This doesn't especially happen in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for the most part. The mix-up potential is huge, and you can die really fast, but the idea of one-touch kill is something that's fairly difficult to do, and is actually extremely prominent in Ultimate Marvel 3. It was the same thing in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, the original, as well. DHC glitch and a lot of other things contributed themselves to making your character die in one hit, and a lot of the teams that are the most powerful and some of the most deadly when it comes to your potential in a game like this is your ability to one-touch kill your opponent. So higher health opponents or higher health characters like Thor and Hulk and Hagar and She-Hulk and guys like that, like Abijin, who use all those characters for the fact that they have higher health, it is much more difficult to take them down. But when it comes to characters like Zero and Virgil in Ultimate Marvel 3, they have the ability to one-touch kill anyone in the cast with 1 or 2 bars, if they have them at the start. They literally can build enough meter where you don't get to play the game if you absolutely get touched once. And when it comes to a character like Zero, you literally do not get to play the game. There's almost unblockable mix-ups where you have to predict a side, and that's kind of the way it goes with Marvel, but it seems like it's completely unblockable. And that's kind of the nature of these games as well, is the fact that if you don't know how to block it, your best defense is just not to be in that situation. And Zero's best ability is to put you into that situation from any point in the screen. In Ultimate Marvel 3, there's a lot of stuff like that in this game. It's an interesting prospect to think back in Marvel 1 and Marvel 2, and to think of Marvel 3 as far as it being like ridiculously broken. I honestly think that Marvel 3 is as equally broken as Marvel 1 is and Marvel 2, but just in a different way. Whether this way is a little bit more fair than previous games, it's definitely much different because the style of fighting games has evolved a lot over time. Things like X Factor can absolutely be considered broken. You don't get things like X Factor in Marvel 2 and Marvel 1. Just the fact that that is there is a contributing factor to say that, yo, yeah, Marvel 3 is the most broken one from all because of that reason alone. It's a one-touch kill with any character, no matter if you have assists or not. So it's just some food for thought. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below for some of you guys that might have experience with this. When you think about it now, do you think that Marvel 1, Marvel 2, or Ultimate Marvel 3 are the most broken? Which one do you think is the most broken of them all? And list your reason why. I've already kind of given my base explanation and reasons for all of them, but I think this would be interesting to get a little bit of community feedback and perspective, and maybe we can revisit this in a video later on to kind of get a more general audience opinion on, yo man, which was the most busted Marvel game, 1, 2, or 3? But thank you guys very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed some of the online ranked matches for Ultimate Marvel 3, and I'll be definitely doing a lot more open lobbies for this game on both the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. But until then, my name is Maximilian, and I'll see you guys later.